Arne Sorenson, welcome to this year's 2020 Workplace Summit. We're so happy to have you with us.
I'm really glad to be with you. That's for sure. I wish we were together in person, but I'm glad to be with you today.
I wish we were together in person as well. And I wanted to start with kind of acknowledging that, just 1 year ago, we were at the Marriott Gaylord National Harbor with more than 6,000 professionals attending this event in person. And of course, with the pandemic this year and this fall, we are certainly global, but we are, of course, virtual. And, we will all sorely miss the outstanding hospitality that leisure travel and business meetings offer us. And we, of course, look forward to the day that that the world reopens. As the CEO of Marriott and one of the world's largest hospitality businesses, what makes you optimistic during these times?
Well, I'm an optimist by nature. Maybe that's where it starts. And when this pandemic hit, of course, it devastated our business. In many respects, our business disappeared functionally. Talk about the kind of meeting you held a year ago with 6,000 people together. Those meetings are not occurring today. Sometimes it's because they're prohibited by local authorities from happening because they have limits on the size of groups that can take place. But often beyond that, it's just that we are collectively watching this virus and we want to make sure we're safe. We want to make sure we're taking the kinds of steps that are appropriate for us to take. And so that, the impact of our business has been enormous. But having said that, just in the last number of months, I think we are seeing again human nature prove that we are resilient collectively. While the virus is certainly not behind us, I think many of us are getting more and more used to living with the virus. We're starting to take at least small steps out of our little quarantine sites and maybe get out and see some family or friends, or maybe get out for a meal every now and then, maybe get out in our cars and drive to see somebody. And this came home to me sort of loud and clear in July. Of course, in early July, we saw the virus surge again in many parts of the country. And I worried that we would actually see some of the early signs of life disappear and people would pull back into their homes. And actually what we saw in July and August was just the opposite. Not a huge improvement, but a modest improvement every week. As we showed, I think, ourselves together that we're going to live our lives. We're going to live them carefully and cautiously, but we're going to do a little bit more each week. And we're going to step out and we're going to see the people we love, and we're going to do the things that we want to do, at least in tiny measure. And those trends, I think, are going to continue. It's one of the things that makes me optimistic that it may take us a while to get this behind us, but we'll get it behind us and we'll get back to the kinds of lives we led before.
Fantastic. I'm really looking forward to that as well. So, Arne, in 2015, you made big waves when you stood up against Indiana's misguided law to permit businesses to turn away LGBTQ customers. At the time, you called this discrimination madness. What made you so vocal then and now?
Well, it starts with recognition that it was madness. I think to institutionalize the right to discriminate against people for something that is so clearly wrong has to be called out as outrageous behavior, as madness. And I don't understand. First, it's hard to sort of understand the desire to discriminate in the first place. But even beyond that, I don't understand how a state, how a government institution can sanction it. And if you stand now, I'm a reformed lawyer, so maybe I come at this partly because of studying law and studying people. But I also come at it from a Marriott lens and a personal lens. And those lenses really are about, we are in a business where literally our community of 750,000 associates around the world who represent people from everywhere, of every identity, of every gender, of every faith tradition, of every gender identity, fill in the blank. We literally are people that come from everywhere, and we welcome people that come from everywhere. And if that inclusiveness is our business, and so in many respects, the threats to that kind of inclusiveness we take personally, I take personally. And I think you've got to call them out and say, this is just dead wrong. And we need to stand up for the rights of people. We need to stand up even beyond that for the warmth that we should be communicating to each other through a genuine welcome. And what Indiana did, unfortunately, it didn't last long because I wasn't the only one to speak out. And I think they realized that they were doing something that could not be defended. There was, a quick response there that was useful. Now, in some of the subsequent years, maybe we've lost a little bit more ground, but we've got to make sure we continue to fight for the rights and the warmth and welcome of everybody.
Well, we thank you for that as an organization on behalf of the community. And, I think you said it, when it changed, I think largely it was because of the power and momentum of the corporate community and certainly the personal example that you set as the CEO of such a powerful company. So thank you for that. Let's talk now about some of the very toughest issues facing every leader at these moments where there's a lot converging, a lot happening, and how business leaders can respond to systemic racism, in particular, the painful loss of Black trans individuals, and the Black Lives Matter movement in general. As the CEO of Marriott and as an ally, what role do you play?
Well, we've got to do everything we can do. Marriott, we've talked for years about doing business in the communities where we do business the right way, trying to make the communities a better place. We've also talked about taking care of our people first, because we can't get to our guests except by taking care of our people. And when you have a community, I mentioned the 750,000 associates who wear our name badge every day. When you have a community that is that large and that diverse, that community expects their company. They expect me to speak out on behalf of them. And a lot of what we've done in this space, in the out and equal space, for example, starts with the recognition that our community of associates is extraordinarily diverse, and we have thousands upon thousands of them who are members of the out and equal community, or members of the LGBT world, and they want their company to be speaking for them just as they want society to be recognizing them. We've obviously had the murder of George Floyd this year, which was a galvanizing event in areas of race relations and race discrimination, criminal justice system. It was a very stark reminder, I think, to many of us that however much progress we felt like we had made, we clearly had not made enough progress. And I think there are things we can look at Marriott and feel really good about what we've accomplished. Our board is more than half diverse, for example. And our senior leadership ranks of about 700,000 or 800,000, most senior leaders of the company is probably mid 40% diverse, something like that. So, these are good figures. But then you watch a tape of that event for George Floyd, and you can't help but say, have we done everything we can do? And what can we do both in our own house? In other words, what does Marriott do about race? What do we do with our supply chain? What do we do with our hotel owner community, which is another aspect of our supply chain? But then I think we also say, okay, how do we combine our voice with other voices in society, including in the business world, to advocate for policy change that we can't do on our own? Because there's clearly a role for government to play in police reform, as an example. That's not something a company can impose on a city or impose on a country. And so, we've done very much both of those things. I sit on the board of the Business Roundtable, and the Business Roundtable moved very quickly to set up a race inequity task force. I chair the healthcare subcommittee of that task force, which is really looking at inequities of the healthcare system and making sure that we're doing what we can there. But we had a subcommittee also on police reform and justice. And each one of those spaces, we have basically said, what are the member companies doing? What can we do more of? What are the things we want to do to take care of this in our own house? And then separately, what do we want to advocate for on Capitol Hill or in the state capitals around the country? And that work is very much still underway.
So speaking of the Business Roundtable, and as someone considered one of the most influential CEOs in America, certainly, if you could influence any aspect of corporate America as it pertains to diversity and inclusion, what would it be?
Well, it's a very good question. It's an important question. And I think, on some level, the most visible thing is the diversity of our senior ranks. How diverse are our boards of directors? How diverse is the C-suite in each of these companies? How diverse is the broader senior leadership team in the company? And I think in all of those places, we have the ability to set targets, to pay people if they meet those targets, and to have consequences if they don't meet those targets. And I think the more we can see that kind of representation, I think, one of the things that is a powerful aspect of human nature is we all like to see ourselves. We like to see ourselves represented because it's the strongest proof that we're welcome. And so when we look at a group like a board of directors or a group of folks in leadership of a company, and maybe we define ourselves differently. Maybe I'm looking for gender representation. Maybe I'm looking for a faith tradition that's associated with it. Maybe I'm looking for race. Maybe I'm looking for sexuality. I mean, there are lots of different ways that we define ourselves, but we want to see ourselves. And so if we could wave a magic wand and have that kind of inclusivity and diversity shown, I think it would go a long way to proving to folks that the opportunity is available to them, just as it is to everybody else, that they're welcome in that company or in that business, that they should have less anxiety, less anger, less fear, I suppose, about being discriminated against or being ignored in some way. And so that is the thing that probably I would do if I were a magician, see if we couldn't accelerate that change faster.
Thank you. And so for years, Marriott has made a visible difference in the marketplace with your welcome of LGBTQ guests and gatherings. I know this personally. I'm a rewards member, and I've been to multiple events that Marriott has hosted, especially during Pride Month. Will you do more of this sort of thing in the future?
It will never stop. It will never stop. And I mentioned before, a lot of this starts with our community of associates. And they've taught me a lot. They have raised their voice. They've welcomed me to their events. They have encouraged me to use the voice that I've got at Marriott to speak for inclusion, to speak for them. They were participating in gay pride parades before we were articulating a philosophy publicly about this community in particular. And I'm sure that will continue. They are proud members of that community. They're fun days. They're chances to be together. They're chances to celebrate successes that have been achieved. There are also chances to shine a light on where we need to accomplish more together. And I think for all those reasons, those events are going to continue, and we intend to be deeply involved. Sometimes the cynics say that we're doing it just to market. And while we're not blind to the fact that we have customers and great customer potential in this space, we're not sitting there with a calculator that basically says, if we do this, we're going to drive that much more business. We're instead basically saying, this is a voice that's important for us to express, and we're going to just keep expressing it.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And if I could, maybe end on a personal note, this year, as you had mentioned, it's been really tough in the hospitality industry and other industries, I think for all of us, because things have changed so dramatically. Many folks, especially in our community, feel isolated at home, and they're really relying on these connections that we have virtually, for example, to connect with each other, our families, and our work colleagues. And I guess I'm just wondering, Arne, if, you talked about your associates before, and you always talk about your associates, the Marriott associates, with such enthusiasm and care, frankly, as you do with your customers. And I guess I'm wondering if you have any personal stories that are really emblematic of the type of resilience you talked about at the beginning.
Well, there are many stories that come through, and this has been the hardest part, of course, of this pandemic for us is when business basically functionally disappeared from our hotels in March. Started, of course, in late January in China, down 95%, something like that, revenue in hotels. And in March, that moved to Europe and to the United States, and essentially we saw business disappear. And the impact that that has on tens of thousands of our associates around the world is profound. When the work is simply gone, there's not much that you can do other than to be transparent and to communicate and to advocate for the kinds of policies that are going to help an economic recovery and help our people navigate from the front end of the crisis to the back end of the crisis with hopefully as little disruption to their lives as they possibly could. But there are thousands and thousands of jobs that have been impacted. And one of the things that has been such a powerful lesson to me is to hear from our folks, including folks who are negatively impacted by the pandemic, with the kind of grace and thanks that they've had, where the response has only very, very rarely been, how could you do this to me? Way, way less than 1%. And overwhelmingly has been, I know how difficult this is for you too. Thank you for being transparent. Thank you for the years, maybe decades I've had working at Marriott. I hope to be able to come back again soon. I wish you nothing but luck between now and when I hopefully get a chance to come back. And to hear that kind of voice from people who have been impacted is just another indication, I think, of how strong people can be, how forward-looking people can be, how generous really people can be. And of course, in the midst of all that, I think all of us yearn for the chance to be back together again with people. There are real consequences of being isolated. And of course, I won't be unbiased about the importance of human connection. A Zoom call or a Teams call is a poor substitute for a hug, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, and what a great way to end. And let me just say, your vocal leadership on the issues within diversity and inclusion, but also specifically during these times, Arne, has been a real beacon of light. And we just really appreciate your longstanding allyship to our community. So I'm so deeply grateful on behalf of Out and Equal. Thank you so much for the work you do, for your leadership, and for being with us at Summit today.
Thank you very much. It's a thrill to be with you, and I appreciate your very generous words.